They didn't even save me a chair, not at the table, not in the house, not in the family. After 15 years of silence, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd at least get a welcome home. But when my dad opened the door, all he said was, "You're still alive." And that was the warmest thing I heard all day. The Florida heat hit like a slap the second I stepped out of the rental car. Humid, heavy, and almost mocking. I stood there in front of the house I grew up in, suitcase by my side, boots crunching on the gravel. Nothing had changed. The porch swing still leaned to the left, the flag still flapped above the mailbox, and the plaque by the door still read, Lieutenant Colonel H. Callahan, Return. Like our entire identity was frozen in military rank. Except me. I hadn't been home in 15 years, not for holidays, not for funerals, not even when I was discharged. Honestly, I never expected to come back. But Caitlyn, my little sister, sent me an invitation to her engagement party. Late, of course. No RSVP card, no formal spot on the guest list, just a casual, handwritten, "If you're around, I guess you can come." I wasn't around. I booked a flight from overseas and took a week's leave no one knew I still had. I stepped up to the door and knocked. Not a second later, my father opened it. Still tall, still stern, still wearing that pressed polo like he was inspecting troops on a Saturday. He looked me over like I was a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. "You're still alive." No hug, no smile, not even surprise. Just a flat observation like checking the weather. "Seems that way," I muttered, forcing a dry smile. Inside, the house smelled like lemon polish and ham. Familiar, suffocating. It looked like a military museum. Shadow boxes, medals, framed portraits. My sister's photo in full navy whites sat on the mantel beside my younger brother's deployment pic. Even my dad's old Fleet Command photo was there. But not a single photo of me. I scanned every frame, every wall, not my high school graduation, not basic training, not even a childhood snapshot. It was like I'd been erased. "Your room's in use," my mom said, brushing past me with a tray of deviled eggs. She didn't make eye contact. "Where should I put my bag?" I asked. She paused just long enough to be cruel. "The garage is clear. Just mind the boxes. We're storing Caitlyn's wedding decor in there." So I dragged my suitcase out back. The garage smelled like paint and cardboard. No bed. Just a camping cot set up next to a stack of centerpieces wrapped in bubble wrap. I sat down and stared at the wall. My duffel still had sand from Yemen in the lining, and yet here I was, assigned to sleep next to party favours. The message was loud and clear. "You don't belong here." At dinner, the table was full. Uncles, cousins, neighbours. There were place cards with names printed in gold foil. Mine wasn't among them. My mum waved toward a plastic folding table in the corner next to a sputtering AC vent and a half-eaten kid's pizza. I sat beside a teenage cousin who didn't know my name. "You're Caitlyn's friend?" he asked, chewing gum with his mouth open. "Something like that," I said. Across the room, Caitlyn stood radiant in a white sundress, surrounded by praise. When someone asked about me, I heard her laugh softly and say, "Oh, Erin, she used to be in the Navy." Didn't finish. "I think she does yoga or something overseas now." Polite chuckles. No one corrected her. I swallowed hard and stabbed a grape tomato on my paper plate. I'd walked into live fire zones, carried unconscious teammates twice my weight, and dismantled bombs with my bare hands. But somehow, this stung more than any battlefield. After dinner, I wandered to the family wall of honour. 4 rows of perfectly aligned frames. Caitlyn, Blake, my father, even my mum in her medic uniform from the Gulf War. but not me. Not 1 inch of wood or glass held my story. I'd turned down the Naval Academy at 18. My family never forgave me. What they didn't know, what they were never allowed to know, was that I was recruited into a unit so classified, my name was scrubbed from every system. I wasn't invisible by choice. I was invisible by design. And yet, standing in my childhood home next to my sister's curated legacy, I realised something else. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd chosen to. That's the part most revenge stories never show you. The quiet part, the hurt that doesn't scream, the kind that builds in silence, under dinner tables and garage rafters, until it finally breaks. And mine was starting to crack. I should have known better than to expect a seat at the table. But somehow, a part of me, some naive, rusted corner of my heart, still thought they'd make room. The party was already in full swing by the time I walked through the side entrance of the VFW hall. Balloons in navy blue and gold, catered finger food arranged on silver trays. Someone had even hired a small jazz quartet. It was all for Caitlyn, my baby sister, the rising star, soon-to-be bride of an army intelligence officer. I was just there. My name wasn't on the list at the welcome table. The woman handing out name tags blinked at me and asked, "Are you +1 for someone?" I almost laughed. "Just family," I said. She gave me a pity smile and handed over a blank sticker. I wrote Erin in the corner and slapped it on like a scar. The hall was warm and loud. People clinked glasses, posed for pictures, tossed compliments like confetti in Caitlyn's direction. She stood near the cake table, white sundress, hair pinned just right, radiant like she belonged in a commercial for perfection. When I caught her eye, she didn't smile, just tilted her head, gave me a quick nod, and went back to her guests. A cousin I hadn't seen in years wandered over with a plate of shrimp cocktail. "Didn't know Caitlyn had an older sister," he said, chewing. "She doesn't," I replied, more bitter than I meant to. He laughed like it was a joke. There were name cards at every table, polished, gold-trimmed. I didn't have one. I ended up at a fold-out near the back by the kitchen doors, where the staff went in and out carrying dirty dishes. My seat was wedged between a stack of catering crates and a portable fan that clicked every few seconds. Caitlyn walked by once to use the restroom. She didn't stop. Someone made a toast, glasses raised. "To Caitlyn and the future!" Applause erupted. I didn't clap. Then came the moment that stuck with me more than anything that night. A woman, one of Caitlyn's old academy friends, asked about me. Just a friendly conversation starter. Caitlyn barely hesitated. She smiled and said, "Oh, Erin? She used to be in the Navy, I think. Didn't finish. She teaches yoga or does non-profit stuff overseas. She floats." She floats. That phrase punched through my ribs like a cold blade. I didn't even know what hurt more, the lie or how easily it rolled off her tongue like it had been rehearsed, like that was the version of me she had sold to everyone who ever asked. And nobody corrected her, not my parents, not my brother, not a single soul who should have known me. I sat there in silence, chewing the inside of my cheek, staring at the tablecloth pattern like it had answers. No one asked me what I did. No one said thank you for your service. Not even a side glance. I was just extra. If you've ever shown up to something and felt invisible, like people looked right through you, then you'll understand this part. You know that moment where your jaw clenches and you start thinking, am I overreacting, or is this as cold as it feels? Because let me tell you, I've walked into bomb zones with less tension in my chest than I felt at that party. And maybe I'm not the only one who's had a family that smiled for the public while pretending you don't exist. If that's ever been you, I'd honestly like to know. Because sometimes I wonder if it's just me. Feel free to drop something in the comments, just to say you felt it. I'll be reading. Back to that night. Eventually, I wandered toward the so-called Wall of Honor. My parents had replicated the family legacy here, rows of framed military photos lined up like trophies. There was Caitlyn, in her dress whites, Blake, my younger brother, in desert camo. Dad, mid-salute, back in his Fleet Command days. Even Mom, her nurse's uniform from deployment framed with a medal she'd received in Kuwait. But me? Nothing. Not a boot camp photo. Not a flag shadow box. Not even a childhood picture tucked behind a potted plant. It wasn't just that they hadn't included me. It was that they had deliberately removed me, erased me. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, staring at the blank space that should have held my face. The part that really broke me wasn't the exclusion. It was the thought that maybe, deep down, they were proud that I was gone. Because it made their story cleaner, more honourable, more manageable. I wasn't a war hero in their eyes. I was a loose end, a whisper, a version of the truth they chose to leave behind. And what do you do when the people who are supposed to love you decide you're just a footnote? You shut up, you sit back, and you float, just like Caitlyn said. But me, I wasn't built to float. I sink, I fight. And when it matters most, I surface. And that moment was coming. I could feel it. I wasn't even sure I should go to the ceremony. Technically, I wasn't invited. The formal RSVP list had gone out a month before Caitlyn's Navy commissioning and, surprise, I wasn't on it. But she sent a last-minute text 2 days prior that just said, "If you're around, the auditorium doors open at 1300. No, I'd love to see you there. No, it would mean a lot. Just information, like a weather report." But I went. Because some part of me still wanted to believe I mattered, even just a little. The Naval Command Centre auditorium was packed. Rows and rows of uniforms, families, officers in full dress. I wore a simple grey dress shirt and dark pants. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed, "Look at me." I'd spent too long in the shadows to be comfortable in a spotlight. At the check-in desk, the young ensign blinked at my name. "Sorry, you're not listed on the manifest." I handed him the crumpled paper invitation Caitlyn had texted me. He looked it over like it was a menu in a foreign language. Finally, he nodded and motioned toward the rear. "Last row, left aisle. You can sit there." Of course. I took my seat quietly. The couple next to me, probably some junior officer's parents, didn't even glance my way. I kept my hands in my lap and stared straight ahead like someone waiting for a train that already passed. When the music started and the graduates began filing in, Caitlyn was near the front. Perfect posture, sharp uniform, polished shoes. She looked exactly like the kind of daughter my parents always wanted. And they sat front and centre, beaming. As she took the stage to speak, I braced myself. I don't know why I already knew what she'd say. "My father once commanded a fleet. My mother served as a medic in the Gulf. My brother is preparing for deployment. And I'm proud to carry on that tradition." No mention of me, not even a pause. I shouldn't have cared, but it felt like getting erased, again, in front of strangers. I lowered my eyes, jaw tight. I didn't clap, I didn't blink, I just existed. Small, silent, forgotten. Then the doors creaked. At first it barely registered, but heads turned, the sound of polished shoes on the linoleum. A hush moved through the room like a ripple on still water. A man stepped in, tall, square-shouldered, service ribbons gleaming on his chest, mid-40s, battle-worn but unshaken, Major Lucas Ortega. The last time I saw him, we were knee-deep in sewage tunnels under northern Iraq, dragging a bleeding comrade through gunfire. We hadn't spoken since, not a word. He scanned the room, then stopped, our eyes locked. For a long second, neither of us moved. I thought he'd just keep walking, pretend he didn't see me. That's what most people did. But then he stopped dead center, turned to face me, and raised his hand in a crisp, unmistakable salute. "Ma'am, SEAL Commander?" The entire auditorium froze. I felt it hit the room like an explosion. You could hear the air being sucked out of people's lungs. Forks paused mid-air. A woman gasped audibly. My mother's phone slipped from her lap and clattered onto the tile. My father's brows drew in, not anger, but confusion, like a man realizing the house he built had a missing wall. Caitlyn just stood there, frozen, one hand still resting on the podium. I didn't stand. I didn't return the salute. I just nodded, barely, and sat still. It wasn't pride. It wasn't bitterness. It was restraint. Let them wonder. Let them feel the weight of everything they didn't ask me. Let them sit in the silence I'd lived in for years. Major Ortega turned, walked to his seat, and sat down without a word, like nothing had happened. But everything had. The ceremony limped forward after that. The applause wasn't quite as thunderous. Caitlyn fumbled her closing lines, hands trembling just enough for me to notice. My parents didn't clap as enthusiastically. Something had shifted, not for the audience, but for me. I hadn't even known I needed that moment until I had it, not because I wanted attention, but because finally, after all these years, someone had spoken my name in a room full of people who had buried it. I walked out before the cake cutting. Outside, under the overhang, I leaned against a pillar and watched the breeze stir the flags along the lot. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, but I felt real, seen, not celebrated, just acknowledged, and sometimes that's everything. Then came the vibration in my pocket. I pulled out the encrypted satellite phone I hadn't touched in months. A single message blinked. Unauthorized access, Storm Hatch archives, internal breach flag. I stared at it. The timestamp, the IP origin, Caitlyn's university, her department, her login credentials. I felt the blood drain from my face. She didn't know. She couldn't have. There's no way she meant to. But the system didn't care. Storm Hatch wasn't just classified. It was buried. And whoever accessed it had tripped a red line, a beacon to every buried ghost in the system. I looked up at the sky. Just an hour ago, I'd been invisible. Now I was exposed, and I knew this time the past wasn't coming quietly. It was clawing its way back, and it had my name on its spine. I sat in the parking lot for nearly an hour after the ceremony, not crying, not angry, just frozen. The message on my phone hadn't changed. Unauthorized access, Storm Hatch archives. Origin, university server. User, C. Callahan. Caitlyn. She had no idea what she'd just done, but the system didn't care about intent. The moment her login tripped the shadow protocol, it pinged every firewall that still remembered Storm Hatch, every buried line of code meant to never wake up unless something went very, very wrong. I drove back to the base motel in silence. The walls were thin, the lamp flickered, the air conditioner groaned like it was trying to breathe. I didn't unpack. I powered up the hardened laptop I kept in a double-locked suitcase and tunneled into the secure network. She'd accessed the raw logs, not the cleaned summaries, not the public-facing abstracts. The mission tapes, the field reports, the names. One name, mine, had been redacted from most systems. But there were fragments in the logs that still carried identifiers. CMD Monroe, Field Lead, EXT5. And Caitlyn had stumbled straight into them. Not just stumbled, she'd downloaded them, maybe even copied. For what? A term paper? A thesis? A blog? I slammed the laptop shut and sat back, my pulse thudding in my ears. How many times had I nearly died to keep that operation buried? How many women had vanished so the government could maintain its illusion of control? And now my baby sister had walked straight into the graveyard of it all and dragged me back with her. I called her. No answer. I called again. And again. Finally, she picked up. "Cass?" Her voice was soft, groggy. "Everything okay?" "We need to talk. Now." There was a long pause. "Can it wait till morning?" "No." We met at the back porch of my parents' house, just like when we were kids, sneaking out for late-night cereal. The same porch swing, same chipped paint. The cicadas were screaming in the hedges. She stepped out in sweats, makeup still half on from the ceremony. "What's this about?" she asked, arms folded. I didn't waste time. "You accessed Storm Hatch." The blood drained from her face. I didn't mean to. It was for my research. I was writing about female special ops integration. The file just opened. I didn't know what it was. That file was locked for a reason. "I didn't publish anything," she said quickly. "I swear, I got curious. I wanted to know more. You never told us where you went, who you were." "So you hacked a sealed op." My voice was low, sharp. "Do you know what that triggers?" Her silence was answer enough. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." And the worst part? I believed her. She hadn't meant harm, but harm didn't care about intention. I walked back to the motel. I didn't speak to my parents. Not yet. The next morning I woke to 6 missed calls and a voicemail from my dad. "We need to talk. Caitlyn's under review. Her ROTC placement is on hold. You need to come clean about what you've been doing and fix this. You're dragging us all down again." Dragging us down again, that's how he saw me. A liability. A problem to contain. Not a sister, not a daughter. Just a mistake that refused to disappear. Later that day, the command center pinged me with a red-flagged alert. A congressional subcommittee had received a case study packet marked Storm Hatch, with scrubbed names, exaggerated failures, and no operational context, just enough to make us look like a disastrous experiment in gender warfare. And Caitlyn's name was listed as the source of initial retrieval, not leak, just retrieval. Clean, sanitized, plausible. They were using her to float a narrative that women like me didn't belong in combat, that we were liabilities, that we'd failed, and they were going to bury the rest. I confronted my parents that evening. Mom was scrubbing dishes with furious precision. Dad was at the counter, arms crossed, like a general in civilian clothes. "You need to fix this," he said. "Caitlyn's future is on the line." "So was mine," I said, 15 years ago, and not one of you asked where I went." "Because you didn't follow the path, Erin. You went rogue. You broke the rules." "I followed orders that didn't officially exist." Mom turned, eyes tired. "We worried about you for years. Not because you were gone, but because you never called, you never explained. We couldn't defend you. You didn't try," I snapped. "You told people I floated. You acted like I failed." "You did fail," Dad said, voice rising. "You failed this family." That's when I laughed, cold, hollow. "No, Dad, you just hated that I disappeared outside your control, that I didn't fit your picture frame." I left without another word. Back at the motel, I opened the false bottom of my rucksack and pulled out a solid-state drive wrapped in a sock. 15 years of silence sat in my palm. Encrypted logs, audio debriefs, drone footage, proof. Storm Hatch wasn't a failure. It was a miracle that no one wanted to admit happened. And now if I didn't act, they'd erase us for good. And this time, they'd use my own family to do it. The SSD felt heavier than it used to. Maybe because I finally understood what it really carried. Not just classified intel, but names. Silence weaponized into obedience. I sat at the edge of the motel bed, blackout curtains pulled tight, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The last time I opened this drive, I was in Syria. The last time I accessed Storm Hatch logs, 3 of us were still missing. Now, I wasn't hunting ghosts. I was one. The mission files were clean, no leaks, no breaches, but something was off. A recent extract had been downloaded by an internal oversight channel. Not just reviewed, but altered. They'd cut the context, removed the nuance, kept the blood and mistakes, but none of the reasons behind them. They painted us as reckless, made our hesitation look like incompetence, reduced 15 days of hell to a PowerPoint cautionary tale. And the person feeding that narrative, Colonel Warren Hull, a man who'd once called Storm Hatch a feminist PR stunt wrapped in desert camo. Now he had leverage. My sister's unintentional breach, my erased service record, and a room full of senators looking for political points. They weren't just coming for me. They were coming for the idea that women like me should have never been trusted with rifles in the first place. I drove 3 hours through the night to meet Ellie Tran, the only teammate from Hatch I still trusted. We met in a forgotten Vietnamese cafe outside Norfolk, the kind of place where names didn't matter and the lights buzzed low. Ellie was smaller than I remembered, greyer, but her eyes hadn't changed, sharp, clear, always scanning. "You sure you want to open this again?" she asked, slipping the drive into her jacket. "It's already open," I said. "They're rewriting it, piece by piece." She didn't ask why now, she just nodded. "Give me till midnight tomorrow." I was halfway back to base when my phone buzzed, not a warning. A message from Harper, Caitlyn, subject line, "I did something." She'd filed a request to testify voluntarily at the upcoming committee hearing. She admitted to the access, told them she didn't understand what she'd found. More than that, she wanted to speak to correct the narrative. Her words, "I don't know what happened out there, but I know my sister didn't fail, and someone has to say it out loud." I stared at that line for a long time, not because it fixed anything, but because, for the first time in our lives, she wasn't hiding behind what the family needed her to be. The night before the hearing, my father called, not to apologize, to warn me. "This isn't about you anymore, Erin. This is about the family, the name. Don't drag us through the mud, just to prove a point." "The point," I said, "is that you dragged me through it first." There was silence, a long one. "You never understood consequences," he finally said. "You're right," I replied. "I thought being forgotten was the worst thing. Turns out, it's being remembered for the wrong reasons." The next morning, I put on my uniform for the first time in nearly a decade. No medals, no stripes. Just the grey cloth and the weight of everything that had come with it. At the Pentagon, the hearing room was packed. I wasn't there as a defendant, not even as a witness. I was a crack in the wall they built to keep stories like mine out. Hull was already seated when I walked in. He didn't look up. I opened with the facts, what Storm Hatch really was, why it was buried, why we hesitated, why we survived. Then I opened the footage, body cam, night vision. The moment I ordered the team to hold fire because I saw a child. The moment we carried a wounded soldier through sniper territory without backup. The moment we chose decency over blind obedience and saved lives because of it. The room didn't breathe. And when it was done, Caitlyn took the stand. She stood in her cadet greys. No ribbons, just truth. I accessed something I wasn't supposed to, but I learned something we all should have known, that sometimes the ones we forget are the ones who did the most. Her voice didn't shake once. Not when she said my name, not when she said she was proud to share it. Colonel Hull was removed from the panel by noon. A formal investigation followed. As for me, They restored my record, reinstated my full-service designation, filed my name, finally, under Distinguished Operations, Covert Tier 1. But more than that, I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to the system, not to the world, and maybe for the first time, not to the people who once swore they loved me. The community hall in Jacksonville hadn't changed since I was a kid. Same squeaky tile floors, same smell of overcooked coffee and folding chairs, but this time it wasn't bingo night. It wasn't a military fundraiser. It was my story on the flyer taped to the front door. Erin Callahan, SEAL Commander, silent no more. I stood in the wings as the small crowd gathered. Veterans, students, neighbours who once crossed the street to avoid my mother's disgraced daughter. Now they were here to listen. Caitlyn took the stage first. Hair pulled back, voice steady. She didn't wear a uniform, just a plain white blouse and grey slacks. Something respectful, something neutral. I used to think my sister disappeared because she failed, she began. But the truth is, she just couldn't say where she went or who she became, because the world never gave her permission to exist. The room was quiet. You could hear every breath. Behind her, a screen lit up with a photo from the declassified report. It was me, covered in sand, helmet off, face cut, eyes forward. No medals, no caption, just a line underneath. Not every hero is in the frame. Some are the frame itself. I walked out slowly, hands steady. No papers, no script. I didn't need one. I looked out over the crowd and started. I used to think being forgotten was the worst thing, but it's not. The worst is being invisible to the people you love. Sitting in the corner of your own family photo and wondering if you ever mattered at all. I paused. No one moved, not even a whisper. But when you finally get seen again, when someone finally says your name out loud, it's not about vengeance. It's not even about justice. It's about standing up so the next person who gets erased doesn't have to do it alone. In the front row, my dad stood. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough. He walked up to the edge of the stage, looked up and said, "You did what I never dared, and I'm sorry I didn't ask who you really were." My mum joined him, quiet, teary-eyed. She whispered as she hugged me, "I'm sorry I never asked if you were okay." After the event, a little girl walked up to me with a small bouquet of purple flowers. She wore her dad's old dog tags and had her hair braided tight like mine once was. "I want to be like you when I grow up," she said, brave but quiet. I knelt and looked her in the eye. Then never let someone else write your story, not even your family. And now to you. If you've ever sat in silence while your name disappeared from the story, if you've ever felt like your presence made others uncomfortable, if you've been left out of your own family's narrative, I see you. And I want to hear you. Drop a "still here" in the comments if you've ever felt invisible but refused to disappear. Let's remind the world how many of us are still standing. We were never the problem. We were just the part they couldn't control.